Greetings collectors and welcome to today's episode. We're looking at games new and old to decide if they're worth adding to your collection. Sometimes games are difficult, sometimes games are easy. Today's game has a difficulty of legendary proportions. Today's game is Hercules for the Commodore 64. Before I begin, I'd like to clear up a few points. This is not Hercules Slayer of the Damned, published by Gremlin. This is just Hercules, published by Interdisc in 1984. When researching the history of this game, I found so much misinformation on the internet regarding the game caused by games with similar titles. To confuse the issue even more, there were more games of the same name on other platforms, such as the Sinclair Spectrum. The game was also later reissued by other publishers. For me, this is one of the reasons I began this channel. I see a lot of YouTube channels where gamers have just downloaded a ROM to play on an emulator and then reviewed it. I'm making it my personal mission here to only talk about games that I have in my collection. After all, the show is about collecting rather than just reviewing the gameplay itself. Don't worry though, I've got some great items in my collection that I hope other collectors will be pleased to see. So without further ado, here is Hercules, published by Interdisc in 1984. As far as I've been able to research, this game was only ever published on cassette rather than the faster loading and more expensive disc system. The cassette case is fairly standard with a rather fetching design. What's odd though is the amount of space dedicated to the messages non-Hercules related. At the top of the cover there's a suggestion of a Commodore 64 free competition, and at the bottom a new random access to frames call out. Both of these I find strange to print on an otherwise appropriate front cover. Things get even stranger on the back. When you buy a cassette game, you would expect a game synopsis, publishing year, publisher, or even a screenshot. After all, these were the days when you went into a shop and physically looked at the back of a cassette to decide if the game was worth a purchase. Instead, you get one of the strangest and out-of-place back cover messages I've ever seen. It reads as follows. The Count of Mantissa. No one knows the real age of the Count, nor where he was born. All that is known is that his present incarnation is not his first, and during the heyday of Athens, he was one of Socrates' closest friends. Above is the only photo of the Count known to exist. We apologise for its poor quality. There is very little information regarding the Count of Mantissa online, other than it is a mathematical function. From what I've been able to understand, the Count seems to refer to the game's developer. It's a strange way to promote yourself, but interesting to see. I believe the Count to be an alias for the developer Steve Back, but I have no definitive proof of this. Inside the sleeve, there's a nice backstory to set up the game, along with the standard loading instructions. The premise is based on the 12 labours of Hercules. You must pass 11 challenging levels to unlock the final 12th labour. What's also great here is the paragraph titled, "Do you sincerely want to be rich?" It reads, "If you have written any games and you'd like to earn a mint, why not send them to us at Interdisc, 249-251 Kensal Road, London." Programmers were encouraged to send in their homemade games. For me this brings back a wave of nostalgia, as this is the type of message that was not uncommon at the time. Due to data storage sizes and limited memory, there was every chance that a backroom coder could make the next hit game. A great example of this is Matthew Smith's legendary Manic Miner, proof that a one-man operation could create a hit. Would Hercules be a hit though? Well, everything I've read and seen seems to suggest no. Not because of the gameplay, but due to the rarity. A huge gap in the archives exists around this game, and it's thought to have had a very small production run based on the size of Interdisc at the time. eBay also bears out that this game isn't one that's often traded. It took me a long time to finally track down the black box edition of this game. The game opens up to a rather nifty title screen and some quite decent music. The graphic designs here are reminiscent of Game of Thrones. Nothing to shout about, but not a bad start. Press the start button and away you go. One of the first 11 labours of Hercules is randomly selected and explained as part of the backstory. Then 3, 2, 1, death. Well, that wasn't a good start. Perhaps I was unlucky. Here we go again. Different labour. 3, 2, 1. Death. So it suddenly dawns on you that this game is punishing in a way that seems completely unfair. Basically, after a short timer expires, the ground you stand on bursts into flame, causing a fiery one-hit death. The aim, of course, being to try and survive by navigating your way to the exit. If this is your first time playing, this is a case of 100% trial and error. After a few false starts, you find yourself getting a little further. Onto this rope, onto this platform, and then the platform disappears, of course. This is a game that just ignores the rules of the learning curve and makes the player learn the level patterns and timings by heart. If I'm honest, I can see a lot of people giving up on this one fairly quickly. Imagine presenting this type of difficulty to a 10-year-old nowadays. Here you go, Jimmy. Be the hero Hercules and fulfill the 12 labours. Poor Jimmy. Back in the day though, I think generally gamers had a different perspective when it came to games. The modern idea of tutorial levels, helpful inventories and display tips just weren't a feature in 80s gaming. 80s gamers saw a challenge and rose to it. Graphically, the game is quite pleasing. It's simple, but I can tell what the programmer was going for, and the animations flow nicely. Overall, it's not overdone, it's just right. In the sound department, the game is reasonably standard. It's not the type of adventure game that needs mood music or snazzy sound effects. What's here is good and fits the feel of the game. Now, obviously, I have to give this game some criticism. The idea is very sound, simple platforming with a simple end goal. As mentioned though, it's the vertical learning curve that will ultimately kill interest in this game for most players. If you have no particular nostalgia link to this game, then this one really is just an oddity to explore. However, the steep learning curves also provide perhaps what is the greatest draw of the game. When playing this one for the review for the first 20 minutes, I spent myself wondering should I actually have started on a different game. The next hour though was spent incrementally getting better and better at the levels. Playing this game is a series of small wins. It's a bit like when you play Donkey Kong for the first time. Everyone assumes that you can just jump on and clear level 1 with no problems. As with Donkey Kong though, there's more to it than that. It's the pattern learning, trial and error, and the gamer's will to replay and go further this time. I found myself saying, just one more go, after each cheap death. It's a clear sign that the game is addictively challenging. In terms of difficulty versus enjoyment, Hercules is clearly an addictive challenge, scoring highly on both difficulty and enjoyment. The main issues here are that the game takes quite a while to become accustomed to. You'll most likely find that on some levels there's little indication of where to go, and on occasions where you do know where you're going, either the pixel perfect precision needed to avoid the enemies or the slippy controls on hanging ropes will lead you to your downfall. I can only partly blame the control system though, I'm also no master of this game. So, if you want to put Hercules in your collection, how much should you pay? In many ways this one is a supply and demand question. On the one hand, I can certainly agree that this game is rare. It's not readily seen often on the auction sites, and the history indicates that it has a small production run. However, rarity does not automatically mean expensive. The demand for this game is relatively unknown. Considering that the game itself is reasonably unknown, and that Commodore 64 collectors are probably thinning out these days, it means that the collector base could be low for this item. Of the copies I have seen sold, there seems to be a ceiling price of around £10. That's around $16 to $17 in the US, which seems about right. However, as this one gains notoriety, the demand for this game could dramatically increase as collectors look for those legendary difficult games of the era. In the past, the Commodore 64 community have seen some great game prices spiral out of control. My final verdict on this one is that Hercules really is a game of its time. If you appreciate a real retro challenge and can track down a copy, then this really is a must-own title for your collection. For casual gamers though, I think that just the footage I've shown here should fulfill your curiosity. If you don't like difficult games, then this one really is just a shelf filler. For the speculative collector looking to make an investment, I'd say that this one is worth picking up, if you can get it in a job lot or for a low auction price. If you happen to have a copy of Hercules by Interdisc, please let me know in the comments section. There appears to be minimal information on the original release, so if you have any interesting information, please share. For a future episode, I hope to follow up on games featured on this channel. But the legend didn't end there. In 1990, from the ashes of Hercules, a new challenge was born. That game was Yolanda. Steve Back was back with the ultimate challenge. See part 2 of this review to find out what happened next. Hello again, and I hope you enjoyed today's show, and thank you for the view. Remember, you can always comment, like, subscribe, and find us on the social media sites below. Happy collecting!